In an announcement on Tuesday, the ODM party stated that Raila Odinga intends to hold public barazas in Nakuru and Kiambu counties ahead of the March 20 mass protest. The baraza in Nakuru will take place on Thursday, followed by the Kiambu event the following day. Now, these rallies are in addition to the ones conducted by the Azimio movement over the past 5 days, which have been leading up to the planned protest against President William Ruto's government. On Friday, Azimio held a large rally in Raila's home turf of Migori County, followed by another event in Narok County on Saturday.
Now, Raila Odinga and his supporters were in Mombasa on Sunday before moving to Kilifi County on Monday, where they continue to call for electoral reforms and action on the high cost of living. During a rally in Siasa County on Tuesday, Raila assured his supporters that the protests would be peaceful and that no bloodshed would occur. He also stated that he has been asked by some members of the clergy to postpone the protests, but he declined. Raila also declared March the 20th a public holiday to allow Azimio supporters to participate in the demonstrations. Now, joining us from Nairobi, Kenya's capital, to discuss all of this, we have Bina Maseno, CEO of Badili Africa and Miss President in Nairobi County. We also have Dennis Nthumbi, an analyst in governance and security, and also Tele Nzomo, program officer at Siasa Place, all joining from Nairobi, Kenya. A warm welcome to you all, and thanks for joining us on the conversation.
Thank you.
Now, I'd like to start with Bina. Bina, could you kindly explain the reasons behind the planned mass action on March the 20th and what specific changes the opposition hopes to achieve through these demonstrations? Hello, Bina, are you with us? Okay, I guess before Bina joins, I would like to direct that question to Dennis.
Thank you very much, and good evening, viewers. And I think the most important thing that we need to do is to clarify several things. Number one is that the elections were over. We voted in August 9th, and of course, Raila Odinga challenged the same within the apex court, the Supreme Court. And there was a unanimous ruling that William Ruto is the winner. So that is case closed. That is res judicata. The matter has already been prosecuted enough by the courts. There is absolutely no doubt that William Ruto won. Secondly, is that one of the things that we saw, even after that, is that recently Raila Odinga came back and said, you know what, the elections were that. The winner of the general election was properly prosecuted by the apex court in this country constitutionally. So it means that the claims that William Ruto is not the winner then are not founded on any legal basis. And then so essentially picketing, which is allowed by Constitution, the Bill of Rights, Part 2, Article 37, says that you have the right to demonstrate, the right to picket, the right to assemble peaceably, unarmed, and to present your petitions to public authorities. But essentially, when you find and you see the reason why Raila is picketing, it doesn't hold any legal water whatsoever. The second thing that he's saying is picketing is because, well, cost of living is high. Okay. It's expensive. Food is expensive in the country. We've been facing the worst hunger that has hit close to over 30 counties thereabout, essentially because we haven't had rain for a long time. But then I need to clarify one thing. Number one is that on March 2018, Raila Odinga did what it is that we call a handshake. A handshake is essentially, they did what it is that is a semblance of a coalition government with Uhuru Kenyatta. And so from 2018, March 9th to 2022, then Raila is regarded to be a close partner of the former government of Uhuru Kenyatta. And the cost of living had escalated from them, basically on many other things that couldn't go well on governance therefore. So the cost of living did not start to escalate in William Ruto's tenure. he has picked up a government that is unable to sustain production. He has picked up a government where the inflation rate was skyrocketed. He has picked up whereby there were several issues within governance that were put in place, interventions of subsidizing consumption rather than production that were put in place that didn't work. He has picked up a government that was struggling and on its deathbed because of corruption. So you're looking at 7-8 months into a new government, and he needs to fix this mess that Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta put in place. And therefore, it would be unfair to try and picket on issues that you adjudicated, issues that you drove the country into some of these issues. So I find that his reason, he has a right to picket, but his reason to picket is hypocritical and insincere.
All right, thank you, Dennis. I mean, you've said a whole lot of things, and I want Tele's opinion into all of this. I mean, looking at the aim of this protest, and we're seeing that the ODM leader, Raila Odinga, declared March 20 a public holiday, and from what we know, he's not the president. So first of all, does he have the power to do this? And do you feel that he's right in his position to call for this mass peaceful protests?
First of all, thank you for having me. Let me just start by picking up where Dennis said the issue of the deputy president or the then deputy president or now president. I think it is unfair to say that the issues that we have in the economy are simply those of the last 5 years. That the Kenyan economy has had challenges since 2013, and we have to say that that was partly the president's fault or the deputy president's fault, and also the former president. And after this, I think we also have to put a large part of the blame on the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga.
Tele, sorry to interrupt you. Could you kindly increase the volume of your device, if you can? We're struggling to hear you. Or if you can get rid of the earpiece, please. Thank you.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, much better.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So just to go back to what I was saying, the initial issue on the issue of the former, of the president now, then deputy president, I think it's unfair to simply say that he wasn't part of the fault or he isn't to blame for the current state of the economy. He's very much to blame because the issues that we have as a country are not issues of the last 5 years, but issues of the last 9-10 years where Jubilee was in power. And half of that, yes, he had a lot of power as deputy president. The other half, you can argue that Raila Odinga stepped in and had a lot of influence in government. On the issue as to whether Raila Odinga has the power to call for a public holiday, of course he doesn't have that he doesn't have any such power. It is not a public holiday on Monday, but it is within his right to protest. It's within his right to picket and to have supporters. Of course, he has to give notice to the police, and he also has to ensure, in my opinion, that it is done peacefully. One of the issues that I think I have with Raila Odinga is that he tends to forget that he also has members of parliament that are from his political party or from his coalition. And within that political party or within the National Assembly, some of the issues that he's talking about, such as high taxation, if you want to deal with high taxation, you do that through the National Assembly. You can have your members take proposals, especially when the finance bill is being deliberated, to have taxation go down. He doesn't seem to want to take that opportunity first before he goes to the streets. I think that is very, very important that he follows due process before he then can say, let us go to the streets, because we have tried to follow due process, but because of the numbers of Kenya Kwanza, that failed. The second thing is that he has to ensure that it's peaceful, because for a lot of people, as we said, because the economy is challenging, to have a demonstration can actually disrupt businesses. It can continue to disrupt the economy, which then plays a counterproductive role. But it is, yes, it is within his right to picket. It's within his right to call for a protest. But no, it's not within his right to call for a public holiday.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to bring in Bina in Nairobi into this conversation. Now, Bina, can you give us more details on the public barazas that former Prime Minister Raila Odinga is holding in Nakuru and Kiambu counties, and how these events fit into the broader strategy of the opposition. I also want to know if these barazas and events have been happening in opposition in the ruling government's strongholds, outside the opposition strongholds.
Thank you so much for having me. I think I'll start by saying that, just joining the conversation and weighing in that one of the issues that the opposition is pushing for is the high cost of living and electoral reforms in this country, and also requesting the president, or rather demanding that the president holds the hiring of the IEBC commissioners. And he's also trying to rally support from his bases first, because we've seen him rallying support from his strongholds, where he got a majority of his support during the elections. But at the same time, we've also seen the president maintain his stance on the need to have a very strong opposition, and looking at this as a distraction, and choosing not to respond to the demands of the opposition, given that the opposition leader and the coalition had given a 14-day ultimatum for the president to address the high cost of living, which has led to the call for mass protest on Monday, March 20th.
All right, Bina, while we're looking at all of this, I want to bring in Dennis into all of this, and we're looking at these so-called protests. And you talked about Raila Odinga also being in government, being in power. So first off, do you see this as part of his own interests, aside the problems that are happening in Kenya? Does he also have his own selfish interests for this particular protest? And has there been any response from the government of William Ruto to the planned protest by Raila Odinga?
Yeah, that's a very good question indeed, because I think, as my brother indicated, is that there are legal channels to address majority of these issues. And when we look at the various arms of government, we have the judiciary, we have the executive, and we have the legislature. And Raila's party, really what is famously known as the opposition, has quite a substantive representation in parliament. And therefore, instead of seeking these extra legal measures that are absolutely unconstitutional, I'm saying unconstitutional because majority and some of those demonstrations have been violent. Today, they did storm into a government function, and they scattered it. The demonstration in Migori was violent. They took out bridges and all that. So the peaceability that is supposed to be there, the fact that you're supposed to respect the right of others to trade and to live in an environment that is stable, is absolutely not there. But you asked about selfish ambitions, is that we have seen a pattern that Raila has deployed for the last 29 years, which has been interested in the presidency, all the way from the days of Moi, coming to the days of Kibaki, coming to the days of Uhuru 1, Uhuru 2, and coming to the days of Ruto. He has always used this method of force, even though it is seen as a democratic process, but it's not democratic at all. He has always used this process to try and conjure governments into sharing power with him. And the worst case scenario was in 2007, where we had post-election violence, and where we had what we call Nusum Kate government, or the half-loaf government. You take one loaf, I take the other loaf. And, the country, we lost a lot of people essentially. And it looks like he's repeating the same pattern. And this pattern is not supposed to address the cost of living. You want to address the cost of living, you are part of the Finance Act that increased taxation in many other things, and you supported the increment of taxation. You are part of the last government that saw inflation skyrocket, corruption skyrocket, where you killed food production in the country, where you subsidized consumption rather than production, where the subsidies programs for fuel and maize have been looted consistently. So the disposition of Raila has never been that he wants to address the cost of living. Raila's attitude for the last 29 years when he's been interested in presidency has been to fight constitutional, legitimate governments to share power with him. And that is what he wants now, because you cannot challenge an election that has been properly.
But Dennis, sorry to interrupt you. You've mentioned a lot of things about Raila Odinga. What about William Ruto? What has he done to weather this storm? I mean, it's still a politics, and even though you have opposition, there's a way you could also handle them. How has the government responded to all of this?
The thing is this, we have institutions that are independent in the country. The Office of the Inspector General is independent. It's supposed to be the one that assures security of this country. It's supposed to be the one who, whoever who pickets and whoever who enforces the law, they should make sure that they don't cross the limits of ensuring that the rights of others are harmed. His Excellency William Ruto has come and has said, you know, one of the things I want is a strong opposition. One of the things I want is to work with all leaders. I might be William Ruto and I might be from the party called UDA and the coalition called Kenya Kwanza. But he has reached out to leaders from the Nyanza region. He has reached out to governors across the country. He has extended an olive arm to Raila's side of legislature. Many and majority of the members of parliament from Raila's party have been to State House to speak to the president on matters of development. So I'm not looking at William Ruto closing constitutional avenues in terms of deploying development across the country. And unfortunately, Raila's attitude negates the need for elections, because an election says there will be a clear winner and there will be the one who comes second, third, fourth, and fifth, or 17th, depending on the number of presidential candidates that we have. And therefore, if every year, after every 5 years, we get to an election where the legitimacy of properly won and properly litigated elections does not mean anything in this country, then we must as well say that the elections in this country are nothing but a process that is not respected constitutionally. Okay. So I personally find Raila's attitude dishonest to the Constitution and dishonest to himself. I think he wants to share power. And I always say that government, there's an attitude that government is only the executive. No. Government is also the legislature, because it's an arm of government, and it's also the judiciary. And all these things is where Raila is adequately represented.
Thank you, Dennis. Now, Tele, it's one thing for opposition to, to always poke holes in government policies. It's another thing, like in other democracies, you have shadow cabinet ministers, is to propose alternative ways. As the Azimio Lamoja coalition is led by Raila Odinga, have they proposed an alternative to the rising cost of living and solutions to the current economic problems of Kenya? Or is it just barazas and protests all over the country?
Solutions. By general solutions, I mean they're saying let us reduce taxation. They're not telling us what taxes they want to reduce. They're telling us reinstate subsidies, but they're not telling us where that money will come from. They haven't brought a detailed plan of what they would do or what they could do. And this is why before I was bringing up the issue of the National Assembly, they can bring some of these issues there. Yeah, they're members of committees in the National Assembly. They can actually hold government to account. So they haven't been detailed in what they want to do. They have just been very general. But if I may just go back on the issue of the interests. Yes, Raila, I do believe that Raila has his own personal interests. But sometimes you find that personal interests can collide with national interest. And by this, I mean that it's not, we need to also remember that Kenyans are frustrated, right? As we say, the cost of living is high. The economy right now, people are unemployed, people can't make ends meet. And so it isn't just to say that everybody who wants to go and protest is simply trying to look for an avenue for Raila. People are actually frustrated. And it is important that the current president understands that people are frustrated and that he puts in place the policies that will address those frustrations, and that he builds a government that can address those frustrations. Thank you.
All right, quickly, I want Bina to have a final say on this particular topic. And we're still looking at the people here because we have one side, the government, William Ruto, saying it has lots of things to do to the people. We also have a situation where Raila Odinga is talking about the fact that he also wants to help the people and that the taxation is too high. So, Bina, what do you feel should be the solution at this point? And how have the people been reacting to all those signs of barazas and protests by Raila Odinga?
I think one thing that we also have to understand is the fact that the demand for electoral reforms have been a constant feature in every other election cycle, since the advent of multi-party democracy 30 years ago. So there's the trust in the institution. So in as much as we can say there's one individual who wants to serve their own self-interest, let's also remember that 6.9 million Kenyans voted for this one individual, and we have 8 million Kenyans who actually boycotted the process because perhaps they didn't believe in either of the individuals delivering the promises that they were making during the campaigns, right? So at the heart of it, I think, yes, we're looking at the high cost of living. 46% of Kenyans are actually spending their resources on food. That is data in this country. So we have to resolve the food crisis in this country. We have to lower the high cost of food, because one of the promises that was made during the campaign by the Kenya Kwanza Coalition was to lower the low cost of food commodities. And like I said, 46% of Kenyans spend their income on food, right? And that means it leaves you with very limited resources to spread across the other needs, whether we're talking about education, whether we're talking about transport, just across basic needs. And then we can't underscore the fact that we are so polarized in this country, literally so polarized. And also the fact that even some of the, we've seen what has even happened with the public service appointment in this country, right? Which has continued to reinforce the ethnicity that we see in this country. So one thing is to look at how do you work with all the Kenyans, whether they supported you or they did not, whether they voted for you or they did not vote for you. At the bare minimum, you are the president of all Kenyans, not those who supported you, because like we said, we even have the majority who didn't even turn up to vote. And the margins were very small. I think one of the challenging things we struggle with, even with democracy in Africa, is this system of one person takes it all when it comes to winning an election, irrespective of the margins that we see. Because the margins in this election were about 200,000. So I think it's to look at how then do we work together, because these challenges we are discussing in this call affect all of us. Whether you supported the ruling coalition or you did not support the coalition, young people are struggling with unemployment. We have climate change issues, and we are busy politicking. And then at the end of the day, we're going to say that, oh, we were distracted by the mass protest by the opposition. Because one thing we know about African politicians, or just any politicians, they begin campaigning for their next election immediately they've been elected. Like once they swear, they put the Bible down, they begin campaigning again. So I think for me is to remind the leaders that we elected them to deliver on the promises they made during their campaigns and not to politic.
Thank you very much, Bina Maseno. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. I would also like to say thank you to Dennis and Nthumbi and Tele and Nzomo for being a part of this very important conversation. It was a pleasure having you share your insights with us.